We are reading from the Yogasutras. This is our Yoga Sutra online class number 25. We are studying the second chapter and we are in aphorism number 18. The 18th sutra or aphorism is describing the specific details of the Drishya or the sense objects. We are discussing the event called samyoga, a connection or a junction. You may remember that this was one of the two words we were trying to analyze last time, ekatmata and samyoga. We are now discussing samyoga. Once again, let me recall two special interpretation of these words by Patanjali in respect of our relation with the world of which we are a part. We have learned that in any experience there are three participants. We call them Triputi: the subject, the object, and the instrument with which the subject interacts with the object. We are dealing with the event called seeing. In this matter, the subject is called Drik or Drashtri, the seer, and the object is called the seen, Drishya. And the instrument is called the act or the instrument of seeing, Darshana, that it may be the mind or intellect. How do three participants connect each other to complete an event of seeing something? Patanjali says, at first the seer connects itself with the act of seeing, that is the mind. This is called ekatmata or a sense of identity. Identity between the seer, Drik, and the act of seeing, Darshana, that is called ekatmata. Then the seer, Drik, relates itself to the seen, Drishya. Patanjali calls it a connection or a junction, samyoga. It is a connection between two uncontactable things, unconnectable things like that. We are discussing the object, the seen, or called Drishya. This 18th mantra of the second chapter, this 18th sutra of the second chapter informs us about the construction of an object, the Drishya, the seen, how an object is made. So we read the sutra, this aphorism. Prakasha kriya sthitishīlam bhūtendriyatmakam bhoga apavargartham drishyam. The experienced object, the seen, is composed of elements and organs, is of the nature of illumination, action, and inertia, and is for the purpose of experience and release of the experiencer, the subject. We have to explain this. This aphorism explains the nature of the Drishya or the object that we see or that we experience, or in other words, the sense objects, including our own mind. So, number one, an object is that which can be known or revealed because there is sattva guna in it. It has the quality of manifesting or revealing, shining. And that can be dynamic also, changeful, because it has rajoguna in it. Again, the same object can be static or inert because of the presence of tamoguna in it. The gunas are the constituents of the objects, and the effects of the gunas are the created objects and the sense organs. Gunas means some forces, different types of forces, as we say, strong force, weak force, electromagnetic force, like that. These are also forces that make the gunas, and those gunas make the objects and our sense organs. Number 2, an object can be of the nature of 5 elements, both gross and subtle, and also can be of the nature of the sense organs, both subtle and gross. Number 3, some of the objects are meant for both, once again I say, for both the bhoga or bondage and apavarga or liberation of the subject, called the seer or the enjoyer. The objects can be meant for both the bondage and liberation. Bhoga actually means, as we have already seen, experience of both enjoyments and suffering. Both are called bhogas. Suffering is also called bhoga. Maybe a better word is durbhoga. Well, we came up to this last time. And then the aphorism says that the sense objects are there bhoga apavargartham, for number 1, the experience of the subject, and also number 2, for its liberation. Actually speaking, according to Vedanta also, the 2 events like the bondage and the liberation belong to the mind or intellect, not to the subject, the Atman or Purusha. Suppose there is a war. The soldiers either win the war or lose it. But the effect of it goes to the king, even though the king does not take part in the battle or in the war. Similarly, these ideas of the bondage and experience of the objects and liberation are attributed to the self or the Purusha indirectly. Not directly, indirectly. Now, one more thing we need to keep in mind. It clears a big misunderstanding of ours. The confusion is very deep rooted there in our mind. In general, we know that the world with its variegated objects is there. And we bind ourselves because we transact with the world. The more we enjoy the world, the more we bind ourselves to it. Hence, the world is the other name for our bondage or bhoga. This we have learned, and this has taken very deep root in our mind, this idea. The world is there and it is the other name for our bondage. And that is a very, very wrong idea. That is a very, very wrong idea. Neither Vedanta, nor the yoga, nor any other philosophy which deal with our final liberation deny the great contribution of the world and worldly objects towards our freedom, apavarga. It can be compared with our journey through a tunnel. We are caught up in the tunnel and we have to go out of it. The path is through the tunnel. There is no other way. We have to walk through the tunnel. The tunnel continues until we are out of it, which is called freedom or liberation, apavarga. On the other hand, the tunnel provides clue how to get out of it. It is said in the scriptures, asatye vartmani sthitva tata satyam samihate. Having our feet strongly placed on the unreal ground, this is the world, we have to take all steps thereon. in order to reach the truth beyond the unreal. Bondage is due to the samyoga, the connection, and liberation is dependent on samyoga abhavaha, viyoga, the disconnection. Later in this chapter itself, we will learn more about the samyoga abhava, disconnection, in aphorism number 2.25. And we are in aphorism number 19, so we are not far away from that aphorism. And these discussions are building up the case for that aphorism, the background for that aphorism. Swami Vivekananda says, we have to go through different experiences, but let us never forget the ideal. Now the next aphorism is going to tell us why there are differences between the sense objects, the drishyam, between the objects themselves. We need to know their real nature and then how the natures of different objects are different. We have to remember that all the sense objects are a compound or mixture of more than one ingredient. And one of the core concepts of Sankhya and Yoga philosophy is Samyogasya pararthatvat. It is just like a sutra, an aphorism. What is a compound is not eternal, and it is always meant not for itself, but for the use of others. We build a house, and a house is a compound of wood, cement, sand, and so many things. Therefore, by this aphorism, it can be proved that the house is not meant for the house. It is meant for others to live in this house. Samyogasya pararthatvat. Hence, a sense object or drishya is meant for the seer, drashta, drik. We will read the next aphorism. Vishesha, avishesha, lingamatra, alingani, gunaparvani. Vishesha, avishesha, lingamatra and alinga. These are gunaparvas. The states of the qualities are the defined, the undefined, the indicated only, and the signless, that has no indication. This is a very important aphorism. We need to understand it in a methodical manner. Then we will know how we get attached to the drishya or the seen, the objects. The seen material objects are neutral. They don't care whether we exist or we use them. They don't care. They do not bother us. Hence, our interaction with them is due to our own interest, not for the interest of the objects themselves. Like it is said in the sutra, in this aphorism, Bhoga apavarga artham drishyam. The seen or the object of the senses are meant for both the enjoyments, bhoga, and liberation, apavarga, of the seer. It is a one-way traffic which goes from our side only. We are also required to understand it in depth as a prerequisite to our studying the asampragnata samadhi, the highest realization that is being explained by the 25th aphorism in this chapter. Swami Vivekananda explained it in a different way, but in a better way. Among the three pairs of the six systems, he said, of Indian philosophies, Sankhya Yoga is a pair that we know, is a group. The cosmologies of both Sankhya and Yoga are entirely based on Sankhya philosophy. According to this philosophy, Prakriti, my material existence, is unconscious, and it is both the material and the efficient cause of the universe, intelligent cause of the universe, because our intellect belongs to Prakriti, matter, subtle matter. It is both the maker and the matter with which the things are made by the maker. This Prakriti or nature is made of three forces or gunas, the original materials. They are, as we have learned, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Tamas is the force of inertia, Rajas is the force of dynamism or activity, and Sattva is the force of calmness. Before the creation, the nature was in its Sattva state. It was in its unmanifest form and was in perfect balance of these three materials or gunas. Then the balance is disturbed. Now you can ask a question, why is the balance lost or disturbed? Yes, it is because of the inherent power of the gunas to act upon each other that this scope of imbalance is always ingrained in the balancing act. It is so easy. If there is a balancing act proposed, then we should always know that the scope for an imbalance is always ingrained in that act. This is the characteristic of matter. Due to the imbalance, the gunas started combining and recombining themselves in various fashions, and the result is the universe. That is why we, every one of us, have the same three gunas or basic matters in us. The highest manifestation of nature, that is called Vyakta, the manifested, is called Mahat, the universal intelligence. The universal intelligence. Hence, our individual intelligence is a part of this universal intelligence, which is called Mahat. Swami Vivekananda summarized this idea in this way. In the Sankhya psychology, there is a sharp distinction between manas, the mind function, and the function of the intellect or buddhi. The mind function is simply to collect and carry impressions and present them to the buddhi, the individual mahat, which determines upon it. Out of mahat comes egoism. Swami Vivekananda further explained that according to the Sankhya philosophy, beyond the whole of nature is the Purusha, that is what is called the self in Vedanta. That is not a material thing at all. And from this they argue that the Purusha must be mortal, because it is not the result of a combination, because it is not a compound. That which is not the result of combination cannot die, cannot break apart, because it is single. The Purushas or souls are infinite in number. That is speciality in Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya means number. The conscious reality is considered to be many in number, infinite in number. And the unconscious reality is only Prakriti, that matter. Well, we go back to the aphorism, Vishesha, Avishesha, Lingamatra and Alingani. They are called Gunaparvani. The states of the qualities are the defined, means Vishesha, the undefined, Avishesha, the indicated only, means Lingamatram, and the signless, which are not indicated, Alingani. Now let us look at this first one, Vishesha, that is defined, means the gross elements that can be caught by our senses. The different states of the qualities are Vishesha, separate. Number two, Avishesha, undefined. They are Tanmatras, very fine materials. They are different states of the qualities, but not common in all. Avishesha. They cannot be sensed by ordinary people. Only the yogis, advanced in spiritual path, will be able to see the Tanmatras. Swami Vivekananda said, every living being emits a certain light. And this can be seen by the yogis. We do not all see it, but we all throw out these tanmatras, just as a flower continuously sends out fine particles which enable us to smell it. Just as each individual emits some kind of smell. Each body smell is different. So that is the idea of tanmatra. That is how there is an abundance of good tanmatras in holy places. Good people visit holy places and they contribute to the holiness there. Narada says, Tirthi kurvanti tirthani in the Bhakti Sutras. Similarly, if bad people gather at one place, the energy or tanmatra of that place changes into bad. It is not the building but the people that make a church, Swami Vivekananda said. And that is what we always forget. That is why sages and holy persons who have much of the sattva quality can send it out and exert a tremendous influence day and night on their surroundings. A man may become so pure that his purity will become tangible. Whosoever comes in contact with him becomes pure. As soon as you assert yourself in the presence of such people, you will immediately feel a difference in the atmosphere. That is the energy that makes the difference, the holy energy. Number 3 is linga matram. Next is the indicated only, linga matram only. Means the mahat or universal intelligence. It is not collective unconscious, it is universal intelligence. And also the individual buddhi, intellect. It is called linga matram because it is the tool to understand all material things. Look at the difference here. Patanjali is not even talking about mind. So he is not considering the psychological states of the mind and the collective unconscious of Jung or Freud. He is talking about collective or universal intelligence. Number 4, alinga. Alinga means that is the last, signless, which is not indicated. A linga means which can be indicated, but alinga, that is the primordial or original prakriti, that cannot be indicated. After the definitions of the 4 natures of these objects, like Vishesha, Vishesha, Lingamatram and Alingam, we can see that they are actually the different shades of the same lingam. Lingam means the indicators by which one can identify a thing. There is the definition like this, Kinchit Lingayati Gamayati iti lingam. Gunaparvani means the different states of the 3 gunas. We can paraphrase those 4 with the word lingam in the following manner. Suppose I say like this, then the idea becomes clear. They are all lingas. Vishishta lingam, Avishishta lingam, Lingamatram and Alingam. Right? Swami Vivekananda said that there seems to be a great difference between modern science and all religions at this point. Every religion has the idea that the universe comes out of intelligence. The theory of God, taking it in its psychological significance, apart from all ideas of personality, is that intelligence is first in the order of creation. And that out of intelligence comes what we call gross matter. In the Bible it is said, God said, let there be light, and there was light. So there was an intelligent being, intelligence which created. Modern philosophers say that intelligence is the last to come. They say that unintelligent things slowly evolve into animals. That is what the scientific idea. and from animals into men. They claim that instead of everything coming out of intelligence, intelligence itself is the last to come, a byproduct, they say. Both the religious and the scientific statements, though seeming directly opposed to each other, actually are true. The Sankhyas and other religionists put intelligence first, and the series becomes intelligence, then matter. The scientific man puts his finger on the matter and says matter first and then intelligence. They both indicate the same chain in a cyclic order. Indian philosophy, however, goes beyond both intelligence and matter and finds a Purusha or self which is beyond intelligence, of which intelligence is but the borrowed light. We have so far discussed the details of the Drishya or the material objects. We connect us with them and make them objects of our sense organs. Who these we are? We connect ourselves. Who are these we? This is the next question. Because the earlier aphorism said, Drik-Drishyayoho samyogaha heya hetuhu. A connection or junction between the seer and the seen is that which has to be avoided. We should not come in contact with these seen objects. So the next aphorism answers the question, who is the seer? And the seer is. Let us read the aphorism and then we will see who the seer is. Drashta drishimatra shuddhopi pratyaya anupashyaha. The seer is drishimatra, consciousness only. Though pure, not involved in the three gunas, sees through the coloring of the intellect, buddhivritti. It has got all the gunas in it. At the end of aphorism number 17, I said that time that at first the Yogasutras investigates the drishya or the objects of the subject. Later, it will have time to investigate the subject itself in a spatial way. It is a very difficult task, even in modern science also. The participator in any kind of observation is important. Actually, a lot has been said in the earlier two aphorisms, number 18 and 19, about the drishya, the objects of our senses. Those observations are based on the idea that the drashta or the seer is the listener. In each event, whether you call it a seeing or knowing or enjoying, the drashta or the seer is the listener. You are listening to the explanations about how the seer uses the intellect and sees the objects. You were listening. You were able to picture the whole information about how all those three participants were involved in the process of seeing. Now please pause for a while, look back and discover that it is you who is the subject in the explanation. You are not standing aside and observing the three. You, my dear, you are one of those three. As long as you stand aside and see the three, you are ignorant. The moment you know that you are an integral part of the process of seeing, you become free. That is called apavarga. You identify yourself as the seer. You are not understanding the Triputi, seer, seen, and the act of seeing. You are not listening to the scripture. You are mentioned there as the seer, non-different, You cannot stand aside. You are being informed about those principles. That's all. The seer is understanding it as an individual who wants to get rid of the bondage or some yoga. The half of the work is done already. But that would have created a confusion that the seer is the agent who is trying to know the real seer as an object. Hence the real seer, who is the subject and never the object, is being explained in this aphorism. And when you are listening to this aphorism, reading the explanations, you see that you are not the reader, but you are the part and parcel of the information you are reading. The aphorism has to be divided to three parts. Drashta, the seer, is Drishyamatra, consciousness only. Number two, why do we call it matra only, the seer only? The answer is Shuddha, because it is pure. It is not a compound. And number three, how do you know such a pure seer? If the seer is pure, how do you know? The answer is api. Shuddha api. Even though it is pure, it is pratyaya anupashyaha. It sees through the coloring of the intellect, the buddhi vritti. Hence it can be inferred, caught. Drashta Drishyamatra means you cannot have any qualifying adjective for the right or freedom of the seer to be always unattached. It is always unattached in its real nature, but we can infer it from the activities of the buddhi. It is not similar to the buddhi, and again it is not directly contradictory to the buddhi, like light and darkness. It is not similar to buddhi or intellect, because buddhi is changeful. Intellect is changeful. Buddhi objectifies both sentient and insentient things. When the objects remain separate but gets reflected in buddhi, then they are known. If it does not happen like that, then they are unknown. The changeful acts of knowing an object when reflected and not knowing when not reflected are proof of the changes in the buddhi, in the intellect. But in case of Purusha, or the self or the seer, this changefulness is not possible. Because the seer has no change, because it is always the seer. On the other hand, the seer is not absolutely indifferent from the buddhi or intellect, because the seer is reflected in the buddhi, and that is the only whole or viewpoint through which we know us. I know me, you know yourself. The knowledge of the seer gets attached to the intellect vritti. Then the vritti is termed jnana vritti, which is an inert thought endowed with the power to know. Jnana vritti is an inert thought, lifeless thought, but it is endowed with the power to know. The mirror is an inert, lifeless object, but it is endowed with the power to reflect, but not the wood. This jnana vritti is now capable of knowing the drishya, the object of the senses. So the subject connects itself to the mind or intellect, and that intellect connects itself to the object of the senses. And this is the procedure. We can refer to our discussions on the Mandukya Upanishad to know this subject in detail. The philosophical ideas about the seer are more or less similar in both the Yogasutras and the Mandukya Upanishad. They will help us to understand this phenomenon of the mixing up of the seer, the seeing, act of seeing, and the seen. The main ideas that have to be kept in mind are: there are two core principles in both the philosophies of Vedanta and Yoga. They are different. Vedanta calls them Brahman, the ultimate infinite consciousness, which is the seer, and number two, Ajnanam, ignorance, the seen. Ignorance is relative, temporary, relative existence. According to Vedanta, the mistake of the ekatmata or identity between the seer and the act of seeing, and also the samyoga or junction between the seer and the seen, happen due to ignorance. Now what does the Yoga-sutra say? Yoga-sutra calls the principles as Purusha or many individual consciousness, which are the seers, and Prakriti, one material Drishya or seen. These are the two principles. Prakriti has an eternal existence. According to Yoga, the mistake of the ekatmata or identity between the seer and the seen and the act of seeing, and also the samyoga, junction between the seer and the seen, happen due to a false mixing up, due to avidya. In the later aphorism, the Yoga Sutra will say tasya hetuhu avidya. We will see that in aphorism number 24 in this chapter. In both the cases, the seer has to be released from the mix-up from bondage. In both the cases. In case of Vedanta or in case of Yoga, the main thing is that we want our spiritual freedom. Then the next aphorism takes us a bit deeper. Tadartha eva drishyasya atma. Tadartha, the nature of the experienced or drishya, is equal to the purusartha or the object that provides for the enjoyment and liberation of the purusha. This we need to understand. This is a very important aphorism. Nature has no light of its own, Swami Vivekananda said. As long as the purusha is present in it, it appears as light. But the light is borrowed. Just as the moon's light is nothing but the reflected sunlight. So that light is borrowed. According to the yogis, all the manifestations of nature are caused by nature itself. But nature has no purpose in view, has no need except to free the Purusha. We are going to learn a radically different thing than what we have known so far, what the general view is. This is one of the very significant contributions of yoga. It brings about an outlook change, a paradigm shift, or a kind of change of our world view, world savu. The objects or drishya got their name as objects because there is a subject, the seer. We have learned this in the earlier aphorism number 18. It has said that the seen is there for the use of the seer for its enjoyment and liberation. Bhoga apavarga artham, use artham. This is the general meaning. Therefore, the existence of the objects has validity as long as it is being used by the seer as objects, artha, or for fulfilling these two purposes, for enjoyment and for liberation. When this particular seer is liberated, these objects or arthas lose their validity or existence for that seer, for that Purusha who was seeking his or her liberation. Hence, the existence of an object is a dependent existence. Nevertheless, after the liberation of the seer, the seen does not attain extinction, does not disappear, but it is said to be as good as not there. It is there, but as good as not there. I don't need it. At the same time, since the seen is a product of Prakriti, which is eternal, it continues to be there and waits for being used by another seer. One seer is liberated, fine, but it is still there to be used by another seer. Hence, we can ask, what is the validity of the existence of the objects? What is the existence of the objects? The answer the yogis will give is that the bhoga apavarga artha, the enjoyment and release artha, vishaya, the objects. The meaning is the nature, swarupa of the seen or object is that it is the object of the seer, subject. It is the object of the subject. This is not taking us anywhere. We need to understand it, and I am using exactly the philosophical explanations. So I need to explain it further. Let me clarify this. This is very crucial in respect of the technicalities of the Yogasutras. We generally translate the word artha as the prayojanam. That is the general translation of the word artha. The need or the purpose. Prayojanam means need or purpose. Bhoga apavarga artham. It is meant for the enjoyment and liberation. Meant for. It is needed for. And the purpose is that it gives you bhoga, enjoyment and liberation. That is the general translation, and many of the books translate it that way, unfortunately. Then we have to accept the idea that the Purusha or the seer has needs, like any one of us. The self has its needs, like any one of us. Then it is not the self. Or if artha means prayojanam, the need, then you are completely confused the whole Sankhya philosophy or Yoga philosophy. And then what will happen? The wrong connotation would be that the seer Purusha has a need, and this is utterly confusing, wrong interpretation of the word artha and also of the intention of the Sankhya Yoga philosophies. We have to clearly understand that the word artha does not mean a need. Please remember this. Maybe in the dictionary you will get artha means a prayojanam, but other meanings are also there. So here the meaning is not prayojanam, not need, but it means an object. Vishaya, it is an artha. So artha means an object of a subject, that's all. Artha means vishaya, artha word means an object, that we have to remember. Otherwise you are completely confusing the yoga philosophy. Bhoga apavarga artham. The validity of the object is here that it is an object of a subject, that's all. It is not being used by the self, Purusha, for its liberation or enjoyment. There is no for in this. It is an object because there is a subject. Artha means object. Well, then how to accommodate the bhoga apavarga artha, that whole aphorism? That is, the object is meant for the enjoyment and liberation of the seer. Let us explain it. The Purusha or the seer is the subject, and the act of seeing is the intellect, that is darsana. Intellect is also an object of the seer. As we said, the object, material objects, sense objects, they are objects of the seer. But here we are also seeing, even intellect also is an object. Similarly, the seer is the subject and the objects, drishya, the objects of the senses, they are also objects. The seer sees the objects with the help of the darshana shakti, the power of seeing. That is the intellect. Clear? Now the seer has to perform an act of seeing. How does it do that? It takes the help of the intellect. Because it is a seer, so it has to see. It can see. To perform the act of seeing, the seer should be an actor. It will have an action, kriya, and kriya means a verb. The seer should have an action ingrained in its nature. Then the self has action. Action means changes. The self is changeful. But then that is not possible. Because the action belongs to the intellect. That's what we have been talking about. The intellect is used. Similarly, if we say that the seer subject has some purpose to achieve, then the seer should think how to fulfill that purpose. This thinking belongs to the intellect, not to the seer. The purpose belongs to the intellect. The seeing belongs to the intellect. The thinking belongs to the intellect. Clear? In the same way, when you go on analyzing actions or verbs, you will find the same answer, that the seer or the subject has no action to perform. It is the intellect which does it. And intellect is not the seer, it is a material object, fine matter. Then the question will be, why do we say that the seer has his purpose of enjoyment and liberation? Again the same question begging. Why do we say that the seer attains liberation? Why do we use verbs against the seer if he is not the actor? The answer is, we use it due to a mistake. Similar thing happens in respect of our behaviors in this world. Like when we do transactions, when we use verbs against things which are inanimate, lifeless, inert. We do use verbs, but they are lifeless. Like for example, when we say a sentence, suppose, many stones are seen. Many stones are seen. We are using two verbs here. One auxiliary verb, are, and another seen. Many stones are seen. These two verbs are used for what? The subject stones which are lifeless. For them these two verbs have been used. Then how do they act? They are lifeless. They cannot. But the verbs we use for a practical purpose. And we make a lifeless object an actor, a subject for the verb. Similarly, we attach or attribute to the seer, the self, a purpose which belongs to the mind. This is the position of the seer and the seen. And this is the relation between them. Samyogaha. Clear? Well, let me repeat this idea. It is important for understanding the meaning in our practices in spiritual life. This idea is very much similar to that of Vedanta. Of the three participants, Triputi, we know that the seer self is neutral. The seen objects are also neutral. Objects are there, they don't care, they don't request you to come and use them. It is you who are going. So, but the self is behind that. The self is neutral, the objects are neutral. Seer is neutral, seen is neutral. Then what happens now? Hence the actions like seeing, knowing, enjoying, everything belong to the darshana, the intellect, the mind. Clear? Both sides are impartial, neutral. Then who is acting? This is buddhi, intellect. Hence the need or purpose belongs to the intellect, not to the seer self or not to the seen object. Clear? This explains the next aphorism, which says, Kritartham prati nashtam api anashtam anya sadharanatvat. That we have discussed already. Though as good as destroyed for the liberated souls whose goal has been reached, yet it is not destroyed, being common to others. It will remain there to help others to get liberation. So objects will remain there. They will not get destroyed because I realized God. In Vedanta, liberation of the individual seer means being one with the infinite reality, discovering that oneness. In yoga, liberation means an individual seer being liberated, and then it joins the class of infinite number of liberated souls called the Purushas. So it leads to multiple principles, multiple infinities. Now we move to the next aphorism. It teaches us what the nature of the samyoga, the junction between the seer and the seen is. Swa Swami Shaktyoho Swarupa Upalabdhi Hetuhu Samyogaha. The samyoga means junction, is the cause, hetuhu, of the realization, upalabdhihi, of the nature, swarupa, of both the powers, shaktyoho, the experienced swa and its controller, Swami. Swa Swami Shaktyoho. It is a wonderful verse. It helps us to understand some intricate technicalities. That is, the junction is the cause of the realization of the nature of both the powers, the experienced and its controller. We will come to the details. It is an interesting and perhaps the most effective way of putting an unintelligible idea into plain and simple language. Well, samyoga is the cause because its effect is the knowledge of the seen and the knowledge of the seer. Samyoga creates a kind of knowledge. The connection between the seer and the seen creates a kind of knowledge, and that knowledge gives you chance to understand the seer and the seen, the subject and object. The connection between the subject and object gives you an opportunity to know them properly. The idea is the seen is independent and neutral, the objects, and the subject, the self, the seer is also independent and neutral. So then when this connection happens between them, which is not possible, but if suppose by mistake it happens, then what does it produce? It produces a knowledge. Then you know the two contactless things are in contact, and that creates a knowledge that helps you to understand both of them. You understand that one is a matter and another is consciousness. This contrast is very clear there. The seer is called the Swami, the controller, that is the consciousness. And experience and the knowledge happens because of the samyoga, connection. Otherwise no knowledge is possible if there is no connection. Connection between the Purusha and Prakriti at the ultimate level. This knowledge is of two kinds. One, the mistaken knowledge that creates the bhoga, enjoyment, and two, the right knowledge, viveka, that brings about apavarga, liberation from the connection. These two knowledges. Mistaken knowledge will create your bondage or enjoyment or bondage, and right knowledge will create our liberation from this connection, from this samyoga. Hence, samyoga is the cause of both the wrong knowledge and the right knowledge, or both the enjoyments and liberation. Enjoyments are due to wrong knowledge, and liberation is due to right knowledge. Liberation means the disconnection between the Purusha and Prakriti. We are reading the Yogasutras. Please remember this. Yoga means, every one of us knows, a connection. Yoga, yuk. Yuj means to connect. Yoke, to connect two bulls or two cows together. But it is speaking about disconnection. See, that is what is called Yoga Sutra. Yoga does not mean a connection. Yoga Sutra emphatically says yoga means a disconnection between consciousness and matter. This is the idea we discussed in the very first talk on the Yoga Sutras. I always said yoga does not mean a connection, but it always means a disconnection. Please try to keep it in mind. As soon as you put this word connection, then you shifted yourself into Vedantic terminologies. But we are studying yoga, not Vedanta. Please keep it in mind. We will stop here today. It will continue for a little while and then we will go to the next aphorism. But it's enough for today. And so we will conclude it with chanting Om once. Om.